Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody that is hopefully for somebody. My name is Kyle Naranya, and on episode 88 of the podcast, I will be reviewing The Fall Guy and the last season of Star Wars' The Bad Batch. As you can tell, my voice is not doing very well. Apologies, but I did not want to miss a week. So, unfortunately, this is what you're going to have to deal with this week. As per usual, there will be time codes listed in the description, so if you want to jump around, you have the opportunity to do so. The Fall Guy will have a non-spoiler and spoiler section, but if you're a longtime listener of the podcast, you know that I always review the full season of a TV show with full spoilers, so if you have not had a chance yet to watch the show, unfortunately, there's only going to be spoilers. Let's jump into The Fall Guy.
You hear me? It's too dangerous. Gotta be stairs. Okay.
Starting off with non-spoilers, if you are a longtime follower of the podcast, you'll know that The Fall Guy was actually number 7 on my most anticipated films of the year. This, of course, was directed by David Leitch with a script written by Drew Pearce, starring Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt. It is a loose remake or adaptation of the 1980s television series about stunt performers. If you are a cinephile or a film realist like myself, you'll know that David Leitch worked for years as a stunt double, stunt performer, stunt coordinator, and then the big break came from John Wick in 2014 that he co-directed with Chad Stahelski. Couldn't think of anybody better to make this film. Ryan Gosling as an actor and Emily Blunt seem to want to play in all different genres, and for that I'm greatly appreciating that. I went and saw this on a Sunday afternoon, and if you are a constant follower of the podcast, I appreciate you and listening to this, but if you think this sounds bad, you should have heard what I sounded like the other day. I thoroughly enjoyed this film. David Leitch's filmography are perfect films for the theatrical going experience. They're big, bold action films that touch on different genres, different time periods. John Wick was much more modern and secluded to some degree in the first film, while Atomic Blonde being a Cold War set film, very different. Deadpool 2 and Fast and Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw's. There's only one Shaw. No, there's two. Never mind. And so managing to pull off different elements. He produced Nobody and then directed Bullet Train, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Moving into The Fall Guy, which has a much more focused narrative, particularly on the relationship around Ryan Gosling's Colt Seavers and Emily Blunt's Jodie Monroe. This film manages to have quite a bit of heart, but the mainstay and the reason you should go see this is just the bombastic stunts that feel as if they're from an age long past in the Hollywood filmmaking genre. That's a very weird sentence. But there are stunts, long takes in this film that are elements of filmmaking that seem to have been pushed to the side for visual effects. Not that those aren't great, but the spectacle of seeing what the human body is capable of, or what stunt performers in general will put themselves through, is quite stellar. There are clips of some of the set pieces in the film, and I'm glad for the most part they were saved for the final product, but I really enjoyed this experience. Is this going to win any awards for direction or screenwriting? No, but that's not the point. And to me, that's one of the more frustrating aspects of the current film-going audience, which is there seems to be a substantial conversation about original properties and superhero fatigue, which quite frankly, I don't necessarily agree with. I think the fatigue is just on subpar blockbusters, and this film is absolutely not that. It, while yes, is a remake of an IP that I was unaware of until the creation or the marketing for this film, but doing something that feels slightly reminiscent of something like Tropic Thunder. If you enjoyed that film, which was a reflection on the filmmaking process and the relationships with studio heads and the egos around leading stars, there are some elements of that I found really interesting to see how some of those elements could have been modernized to this film. And the two leads, they're probably two of the most captivating actors in Hollywood right now. Ryan Gosling continues to manage that charm, hilarity, but seriousness when needed to be, and he is an action star. And it's actually kind of comical that we had something like The Gray Man, which unfortunately, I don't know if we're going to be getting any more of that. I know they have announced a sequel, but are we going to get it? I don't know. But regardless, David Leitch manages to capture what he fell in love with older films, and the captivating stunts presented in this movie are things you would have seen in a different era in Hollywood, probably when there was less protection. But this being a modern film, it offers those stunts that are jaw-dropping. There is a high fall teased in the trailers for this that was absolutely incredible. And it was something that I was talking about leaving the theater, which was you don't get to see this level of stunt coordination or stunt performers anymore. You have a lot of stunt performers working in Hollywood, but often it's either used as reference and then overdone with CGI, or you do minimal things. And unfortunately, because of the way that films are edited due to the alleged attention span of some audiences, they get cut to crap. But the way that the cinematography and the direction works with this, the stunt coordination and stunt performers, there are longer takes. And in doing so, you really get to acknowledge what's being presented in front of you, which goes all the way back 10 years to John Wick with the preparation that the 8711 stunt team did in training Keanu to be able to do those things. And it's absolutely spectacular. You want to complain about original movies? I know I didn't complete that tangent, but I apologize. I had a sick kid all weekend. And this film offers that while, again, award-winning, not the point, but quite frankly, most of the time I'm going to the cinema or the movie theater, it's for entertainment. And David Leitch has so specifically found his groove with what works on the big screen. I would say that this film takes a lot of the elements he's learned as a director and brought them forward to probably his most complete film. Now, I don't think it's his tightest in terms of overall story narrative. It feels a little long at some points, but in general of it just being about one particular person's mission to do the right thing because of the person they care for, it carries all the way through. I really enjoyed Hannah Waddingham playing this absolute piece of garbage human being that in a 90s version of this film probably would have been somebody like Danny DeVito, which is quite hilarious. And Aaron Taylor Johnson showing up as Tom Ryder, a famous action star who sucks. Read into that whatever you would like to, was quite humorous, and I enjoyed that a lot. In general, the cast is not very large, but everybody in the film manages to offer something fun and unique. At the same time, it's pure entertainment. If this is a film that does not work on streaming. If you're waiting to see it at that opportunity, I really don't think that's the best. You're giving the film the best chance to succeed. When I go to the theater, unlike while I'll go and see Dune Part 2s and some serious heavy dramas, which are fine, ultimately I want the spectacle. Now, substance-free spectacle? No, that is not something I'm looking for, and you can get a lot of that from streamers. This movie with A-star talent, providing something fun and unique from all the other things that I've seen this year. And if you've been following along for 2024, it's not necessarily been a great year. Now, have there been great movies? Of course there have been, but so far, looking at 2024, I might as well just pull up my list because I couldn't remember it off the top of my head. I had to pull it up recently, which was, where was I? Most anticipated. So far, I've only seen Dune Part 2. Actually, I did see Kung Fu Panda 4, The Fall Guy. So most of the films, ironically, from my 2024 list. Now, the year is far from over, but The Fall Guy is number 7. With the stuff I've seen so far, it's probably at number 2, if I'm being totally honest. Having seen Dune Part 2, Dune Part 2 was my number 1 most anticipated. It's still currently my favorite film of the year. Comparing that to Kung Fu Panda, Ghostbusters, Rebel Moon, I would have to put Fall Guy up there. Deadpool 3 is my second most anticipated. Haven't seen that. I'm going to be seeing Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes very soon, and I am very much looking forward to that. But complaining about unoriginal films and fatigue of blockbusters, and then seeing that, looking at Box Office Mojo, that $8 million worth of tickets was purchased to go see Star Wars The Phantom Menace, honestly is quite disappointing, given the fact that, I'm just going to say it, it's a bad movie. And if 8 million people or 8 million tickets worth of people went to go see Fall Guy, it would have had a domestic grossing of over $35 million, which is unfortunate because based on the way that the math for this typically works out, that means that this film is likely not going to succeed. And when you are offering everything that the theatrical going experience should benefit from, and unfortunately, as talking to friends and family around the release of the film, it felt like there was a heavy push for marketing that kind of disappeared and then showed up recently in the last couple weeks, is unfortunate given how negatively so many films were affected by the SAG and WGA strikes, that this film's not going to succeed because, well, as I've already stated, it is a intellectual property that existed prior. It's new to generations of people, and unfortunately, it's a fresh new offering that's not going to succeed. So if you were going to complain about being spoon-fed the same things over and over again, ironic with what I'm going to be reviewing next week, then at least giving this a chance. If you're somebody who's a little bit hesitant, honestly, I think it would be more fun to go with a group of people. I enjoyed seeing this with the people that I did see it with, or maybe potentially go on a cheap Tuesday. I know friends of mine are wanting to go and see it, and they haven't gone yet. Please go and see this. I would much rather get more Fall Guys that clearly put in an effort from top to bottom, whether that was from direction, writing, starring, stunt coordination, production design. They went to Australia and did these incredible practical stunts that are jaw-dropping from start to finish, then getting Kung Fu Panda 4 that was not nearly as interesting because of budgetary reasons and having to cut the Furious 5. That to me is quite disappointing, and I am very frustrated by the fact that I really would have preferred this to succeed than some other things I've seen this year. I can get more into the spoiler aspects about the film and what I enjoyed very soon. So I really enjoyed this movie. It is fun with a capital F, and that is a good thing. So if you are interested in having a great time at the theater, this is something you should go and see. I can tell you more in spoilers, which is coming up next.
I never forget a fist. I don't mean it like that.
So we're in full spoiler territory, so if you do not want to be spoiled, you can jump to another part of the episode. So Colt Seavers is a Hollywood performer played by Ryan Gosling, who is known for stunt doubling. I said that twice, but that's okay. Tom Ryder, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, and he's severely injured and abandons his career. Now, unfortunately, I wish this time jump at least lasted longer, or we got to witness more of Colt's self-loathing. We see in the beginning of the film that he has a relationship with Emily Blunt's character, who at this point is a camera operator and has dreams of being a director, and that their relationship is developing, but maybe he hasn't necessarily said where he thinks it is going. So there's a little will they, won't they, which is a fun element. But the jump to his self-sorrow feels really quick, and I don't think it settles in enough. Now, if that's the main point of the film, it doesn't necessarily seem that way, but we have to have him in rock bottom, and then he's slowly climbing himself out, which is fun to watch, and the back and forth between Emily Blunt being one of the leading factors of this film is certainly something you're going to want to see. Their chemistry on screen is absolutely fantastic. It shouldn't be surprising. They're two of the best actors working in Hollywood right now. And so both of them not really communicating, but in particular Colt feeling that he has really let her down, and that because he was no longer this superhuman who, as a stunt double, never gets injured and is capable of doing the amazing things, that made him have self-doubt in himself in what he could offer Emily Blunt's character from a relationship standpoint. At the end of his near sorrow, we see that Hannah Waddingham's character, this sleazy producer, wants to bring in Colt to stunt double for Tom Ryder, Aaron Taylor Johnson, because he's the only one they have left. They're shooting in Australia, which is where the whole film takes place. And having it just be Australia for Australia's sake is nice. Being somebody who lives outside of Toronto, it is nice when Toronto can just be Toronto. If you've watched the trailer for The Boys, that's Toronto. All of the season. Season 4's trailer dropped last week when you're listening to this. And so the back and forth between Colt and Judy, Ryan Gosling's and Emily Blunt's character, is the emotional center of the film. And I really liked the fact that there is an emotional core to what Colt is doing. He's not just the, I'm going to do all the things because I can, and look at me, I'm an alpha man, yeah. It's all from a place of he's brought in to stunt double thinking that's all it is, but ultimately he's sent on a wild goose chase to find Aaron Taylor Johnson's character by Hannah Waddingham's character as the producer, because he's gone missing, and if he finds him, he'll save Jodie's movie, which is on the brink of being shut down, and she would go in Hollywood jail, as it's described. And that being the core provides almost a John McClane level element. While he is very capable, the fact that he's doing these things for her centers the film, as opposed to it just being this macho guy who would not be really truly relatable. And the fact that Ryan Reynolds' character, not Reynolds, other Canadian Ryan, Gosling, feels that he so tragically let her down helps motivate everything that he does, and what he's willing to do for her is quite insane. And this noir mystery he sort of falls down into, metaphorically and literally, is really entertaining to watch. Whether that's him being nearly beat up by the movie's star, alien with a sword, and the movie in general, Metal Storm, which was very Dune, Rebel Moon clearly looking, which I thought was quite humorous. And so following Colt around as these insane things happen to him that he is capable to some degree of managing, but also in over his head, because these are real people as opposed to the controlled sets for the most part that stunts would be done in. Obviously there was an element of danger, and if you really enjoy stunts in general, just a shout out in general, because it's something I thoroughly enjoy, watch Stuntmen React on Corridor Crew, and they recently did have David Leitch on an episode, so that was fun to see. And what I enjoy about the way that the film is constructed is that each stunt that we see Colt do raises the bar higher and higher in the film, and what he's managing to do in his real life, leading to the climax, which is ultimately, what I liked was the spin on its head is that we think Aaron Taylor Johnson was kidnapped or whatever, but it turns out he's working with Gail, Hannah Waddingham's producer, to cover up a murder to save the film, so that way it doesn't get shut down, and their careers, and obviously murder, so you're not arrested by the police. And that Hannah Waddingham brought in Ryan Gosling as quite literally the fall guy. So the metaphor has multiple layers. Literally the fall guy in terms of stunts, and the fall guy in terms of a criminal activity, which is fun. And I would have preferred Aaron Taylor Johnson to not necessarily be the bad guy. I know he wasn't necessarily in Bullet Train. It seems to be something he's leading more into, and if the rumors are true that he is up for James Bond, that would certainly be a big change from him being an antagonist. I know if you're yelling through your headphones or car stereo or phone stereo that he was a hero in Kick-Ass, he's typically on the wrong side of the protagonist, is my point. Watch Nocturnal Animals or something. And so, as I mentioned in non-spoilers, this having those elements of inside baseball, quote unquote, with the filmmaking process, this, me being somebody who's obviously passionate about film and TV, found it really entertaining, whether that was seeing a stunt done over and over because Jodie doesn't forgive Colt yet for completely ghosting her, or just talking about the creative process and writing a third act. Famously, that's where a lot of films struggle. I thought perhaps it was maybe a reference to Fast and Furious, given how David Leitch has actually worked on one. But who knows, that might just be me projecting based on his filmography. And I mentioned it in the non-spoilers, and I've said it here, the building of the stunts was something I thought was really well executed because these are people at the height of their game. And whether that was including something like the Miami Vice jump, which is something that's built into Colt's character. He says it was his first big movie role, him faking his death. The high fall that is in the trailer for this left my jaw on the floor, just based on the fact that we don't see these anymore. The time you're typically seeing somebody fall in a film or movie is usually done with CGI, I'm assuming for safety purposes, but the construction of these action scenes has to be so thoroughly thought out so that way you can set up everything for it. A lot of the times, if you're curious why big blockbusters have just CGI fests and the action is not overly well choreographed or filmed or edited properly, is typically because of the pre-production. And David Leitch, 87 North, 8711, that Chad Stahelski works in, they're related some degree. You can look that up. But this film still managing to capture all those things that you would know from an 87 North film. It's amazing. I have so much fun watching these movies. I think it gets a little long, particularly around the part near the end of the second act where we think Colt's going to leave because the production's going to get shut down. While I thoroughly enjoyed the action set piece in the garbage can, the oh no, he's let me down element of the story again, I don't think you necessarily needed. You probably could have had that work in just with Colt dying and Jody realizing, no, I still did love him. I can't believe he's dead, because Colt does fake his death to get away from the henchmen working for Tom Ryder and Gail Meyer, Hannah Waddingham's producer character. So that's the only real element of the script I thought was a little too long and hurt the pacing just a smidge. But overall, I really did enjoy this film. It's fun from start to finish. The inclusion of Jason Momoa as the recasted character or lead actor in the film was quite hilarious, given the aesthetic of this fake movie in the film, Metal Storm, and his connections to Dune and other blockbusters that have been reshot and whatnot, is quite comical. So if you were a fan of film history and practical stunts, as well as just a fun, captivating story about two people, it's so good. It's not going to win any massive awards. Stunts should be at the Oscars. Quite frankly, it's kind of embarrassing that they're not, because Hollywood would kind of be nowhere with action. Not even necessarily just action, but something serious physically in any film, comedy, drama, whatnot. So I would highly recommend you go and see this. Please go see it in theaters. I would much rather get films like this than a lot of the other things I've seen so far. Madam Web, I would see 4 of these before I would watch Madam Web again. So that will do it for my Fall Guy review. I'm going to be moving into my Star Wars Bad Batch Season 3 / the final season review coming up next.
I thought that the end of the war would mean an end to losing more of our brothers.
All right, everyone's just going to have to sit and listen to Kyle rant for a minute. The best Star Wars that Disney Plus has put out outside of Andor has been their animation. When you look at Star Wars Tales of the Jedi, The Bad Batch, the final season of the Clone Wars, need I go on? If you're somebody who's not watching Star Wars Rebels, if you're somebody who's not watching Star Wars animation because it's animation, unfortunately I feel sad for you, because unfortunately the best stories in this Disney era of Star Wars, which we're at 12 years since the purchase. I believe it was 2012 when they bought Star Wars. I want to say it was then. Yeah. And so it's unfortunate if you've missed this. While not being somebody who necessarily enjoys the prequels, Star Wars Clone Wars and Bad Batch and everything around pre-Star Wars Episode 4, The New Hope, I hate calling it that, but that is technically the full title. Characters that were introduced in a A-Team-esque random backdoor pilot in the first 4 episodes of Star Wars, The Clone Wars' final season, have managed to be some of my favorite characters outside of the original trilogy. Because of what we are allowed to do with these characters, them not being Jedi or Skywalkers, Palpatines, or more so on the outskirts of the main storyline, similar to what Star Wars Rebels was able to do, manages to tell this story about family and choosing who you surround yourself with. And it's not about the predestined decisions, what it means to follow orders, to be a good person. All these things are wrapped up in this children's show, for lack of a better description, but they're delivered in Star Wars. I really enjoyed this season. What was most interesting to me was the irony that, quite frankly, this season delivered something similar to that of Andor, particularly with the prison break. And again, something that Dave Filoni does that, quite frankly, I greatly appreciate, which is taking elements from other aspects of Star Wars. Most of season 3 is about midichlorians. I don't like it, but the fact that they weave them into the story in an effective way, and we're in full spoilers, so if you didn't watch it, unfortunate, but you're going to miss what I think's going to be a decent enough rant, in that making the Force scientific was one of the elements that fans of the original trilogy absolutely despised. But weaving that into the potential of one of the clones might have midichlorians, and Project Necromancer, which I didn't actually look into this because I kind of just like the idea that I had in my own head, which was that this led to Snoke and ultimately a clone of the Emperor. I almost called him Counselor Palpatine, but that's not what it is. It's Chancellor Palpatine in Rise of Skywalker, which, again, as a reveal, not necessarily something that works, but again, something that Star Wars animation manages to do, which is take something that might be necessarily flawed or underdeveloped in the live action and fill it out. Anakin as a Skywalker as a character is only compelling now because of the seven seasons of the Clone Wars that we got to manage to fill out that character, whether that's his relationships with Ahsoka or Obi-Wan, the true devastation of them falling apart because of what they've been through the 7 seasons of the Clone Wars. And characters that could be so cartoony and easily would have been if not handled by other people. But Wrecker, Hunter, my brain is mush because they're just acronyms. Tech, as well as Crosshair. That's the one I always forget. And each of these characters, while being almost a caricature of other cartoons, them having their own specific skill, but they truly are a family. And how they are truly willing to go to the ends of the earth for their crew, for their family. Echo being introduced as a kid, again, in a less well-executed show that would just be hanging around. It's like, oh, I guess we've got to take care of the kid because of the aftermath of Kamino, and, well, the Emperor has taken over, and there's this galactic empire, la-di-da-di-da. But her being the center of this story and her relationship with the 4 of them, and with the loss of Tech, what that means to the family of clones of the Bad Batch, Clone Order 99, and how she is able to connect and sympathize with those who may not have been raised the same way that she is, whether that's with Crosshair, who is also a captive of the weird science island for Project Necromancer, or if it's with Emery, who's like an older version of her. A lot of these elements are super interesting and are played with a mature lens as opposed to just zany adventures. It feels as if moving from season 3 of Clone Wars, which is when most people thinks it really hit its stride, onto Rebels, which was probably a little more zany. We don't talk about Star Wars Resistance, but in having all of these characters reconnect, in Crosshair dealing with post-traumatic stress because of the circumstances of his own service with the Empire, which culminates in him losing his firing hand, and the tremor and him dealing with all of this stuff being wrapped up in a Star Wars show is why I like Star Wars. Yes, the space stuff is really interesting, but if you're not going to tell me a compelling story with interesting characters, what's the point? And I say all to this, that the conclusion of this, where they have truly reunited and can relax and no longer have to go and fight anymore, but then at the end of it, Omega, being grown up, joins the Rebel Alliance to take on the Empire near the start of New Hope. And that is such a phenomenal arc where she is allowed to, she allows her older brothers, and they accept it willingly, of course, to retire. They no longer need to fight, but she needs to do what she can because of her capabilities. And I love that these characters that are so compelling, and their relationships are developed and are complex. They're not basic. They are, some of these story elements you could argue are, but it's in the execution throughout all of this, and none of that can be said without mentioning D. Bradley Baker. He has played all of the clones outside of the feminine ones through all of these shows, and manages to give all of these characters compelling voices, unique characteristics. I love the relationship that Hunter, Wrecker, Tech, Crosshairs all have with each other, and Omega. I cried when Tech died at the end of season 2, and I'm really sad that I don't think we're going to see these characters anymore. I think they're given a satisfying conclusion, and I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend. I know it seems kind of like an insurmountable task at this point, but if you love Star Wars, you should be checking out the animated shows. I'm a little disappointed that Tales of the Sith dropped all at once because I haven't had a chance to watch it. I might bundle it in with next week's episode yet. I haven't decided on that. But I absolutely loved Star Wars The Bad Batch from start to finish. It has its highs and lows, like everything, but the consistency, particularly in season 3, with the focus being on Project Necromancer and saving Omega not once but twice, was really interesting, and having it focus completely on Crew 99 was awesome, and I'm really glad that we got to see this small slice of the Star Wars universe post Revenge of the Sith. That will do it for my Bad Batch Season 3 review. Let's jump into Question of the Week and find out what next week's question is. All right, last week's question of the week was, what was your favorite DC direct-to-video film, specifically from the DC original animated movie universe? Or films, doesn't actually matter, but starting from Superman Doomsday all the way through. Scotty Cameron, how are you, my friend? I hope you are doing well. Wrote in, Batman Under the Red Hood is my favorite, followed by All-Star Superman, Superman Batman Public Enemies, Justice League Doom, and The Dark Knight Returns two-parter. Those are really great. Dylan Pollock of Movies to Watch Before You Die wrote in, direct-to-home video. I'd have to say Under the Red Hood if I'm looking at just the individuality, but The Return of the Joker is at the top. Yeah, I guess you could also include those. That was direct-to-video when you consider how much DCAU it wraps up and gives us. I also really love Justice League versus the Fatal Five. To Give It to Me gives you everything you want in a Justice League story, and they support a new character and are able to flesh out Jessica Cruz and Starboy because we already have established characters. That's true. Those are other DC direct-to-video films as well. If you want to hear James Strecker's response, listen to last week's episode where he talked about his. And then Jermaine Jones wrote in Superman, Batman, Apocalypse. Interesting. I did find it cool that they maintained the art styles of both Superman, Batman, Public Enemies, and then Superman, Batman, Apocalypse. It's in the same story, literally volumes 1 and 2, but completely different artists. And I kind of like that they did that. It feels a little different. I have to say, out of the specific DC original animated movies, it's not an unoriginal answer. Or no, sorry. It is an unoriginal answer in that, yeah, it's probably Batman Under... No, I lied. I said this last week, and I'm just realizing what I said. It's Justice League The New Frontier. In terms of truly feeling like an original film, unconnected to anything we've seen before, I love it. Darwin Cook's artwork is amazing, and I would be remiss without mentioning Kevin Manthey's score. It really captures that Cold War noir-esque elements to it, and I'm a sucker for a good score, which I really appreciate. This was recently brought up by Jermaine Jones, so I'm going to use it because of some recent events in movie marketing, which is based on something. You might have seen it in the last couple days. Who are your favorite versions of the DC Trinity? So who is your favorite Batman? Who is your favorite Superman? And who is your favorite Wonder Woman? There's been multiple versions in live action and animation. I'm very curious to see what your reactions are. You can submit your answers on the podcast directly on Spotify, email, or any of the social medias when that clip goes live. So look for that there. Next week's episode of the podcast is going to be another jam-packed episode. I'm very excited for it. It will be of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, as well as a brief reaction to the first episode of the first season of Doctor Who starring Ncuti Gatwa. You can look forward to that episode next week. My name is Kyle Naranya. Thank you so much for listening to this trying to get through episode of the podcast. I wanted to maintain being weekly. I had people asking where the episode was this morning. I'm sorry, but if you are listening to this Tuesday morning, I greatly appreciate you. Please share the podcast with your film-loving friends. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed making it. I'll see you next time.